It's a big week for spending money. Hello everyone, welcome to Room and Board. My name is Chris George, and today, you guessed it, we've got another 5 reasons you shouldn't back. This time, Lords of Hellas. Nope, Lords of Ragnarok. Are they basically the same game? Only time will tell. And this is a series that I do for games that have passed that $1 million threshold on GameFound or Kickstarter, and usually Indiegogo. That's usually the platform that hits these highs. And it's where I try and convince myself not to spend a whole bunch of money on cool games and hope that you can convince me otherwise in the comments below. And the reason being, if this is your first time here, is because I hate games. I just hate them. I hate fun, I hate joy, and you know what? I hate you. And I just want everybody to be miserable and not have cool things. Also, I recognize that in this hobby, there is sometimes the tendency to always want the next cool thing. And there will also be tons of cool things consistently coming out. So my real goal with these videos is to provide a counterpoint to that hype. To make sure when that game arrives a year and a half from now, you are equally as excited as the day you hit that big old green GameFound button. Ooh, just thinking about pressing it just makes it... Stop it. Stop that. So it's not to pick on the little guy, because having funded in less than 5 minutes, Awakened Realms is hardly the little guy. And honestly, this is going to be a tough one for me. This is one where I entered into the campaign thinking, yeah, I am ready to back. I don't back a lot of things because I'm quite cheap, and I prefer to wait for the savings that can be found when the rest of you all decide you're no longer interested with a game and I can pick it up for half price, skulking around Kijiji like some FOMO vulture that I am. Meow! No, that's a peacock. Akokokcha! That's a vulture, I think. But this is one that I am heavily considering. And a lot of that is because I really like Awakened Realms and the quality that they produce. And I think that their previous campaigns have been pretty decent value when you compare all the stuff that you get versus how much it will cost you to get it later on. And I also love that they have Sundrop, so they can beautifully paint all of those minis, and I don't have to wait for Zach to get around to another box of miniatures that I have thrust upon him. This is my friend Zach, who I get to paint all of my stuff because I'm horrible and he's incredible. So that's always a plus when I can lessen the burden off of my friends. Really, I should get it just to be a saint in that regard. And I also really like area control, the dudettes on a map, tactical games, things like that. I like that genre quite a bit. And in addition, this also seems like it will be the optimal version of the Lords system, I guess you can call it. I own Lords of Hellas, and this clearly shares a lot of the same DNA. But they've made what look like great changes across the board. Obviously, if you've had a game out for 3 to 4 years, you might learn a thing or two and be able to tweak it slightly. Now, here's a quick recap if it's your first introduction into either one of these games. Both Lords of Hellas and Lords of Ragnarok, and they're very similar. In both games, it's area control, and you're going to be fighting to achieve one of 4 victory conditions. Control a certain number of regions, control a certain number of temples, kill a certain number of monsters, or, and the difference between the two, in Lords of Hellas, once a monument is fully built, you have to control that area after 3 turns, whoever controls it wins. In Lords of Ragnarok, if enough things are done, Ragnarok will happen and you have to throw your Vikings into the middle of the board and control the areas closest to where Ragnarok will erupt, because there's nothing better than being a Viking, unless it's being a Viking that's on fire, flaming, with molten Armageddon. So of course you'd be the winner. Of course you would be. But I really like the additions and the changes. The action spaces that used to be on your own board have now moved to a communal board in the center of the region. And while I was hoping that would mean only one person could take one of these actions and the action would be blocked, that's not the case. Even still, if you're the first person to take one of these actions and your opponent takes an action afterwards, you get an additional bonus in the form of runes, which are also a new addition. Runes, you can discard a pair to to get basically bonus moves. You can move your army more, you can move monsters that you control, you can get additional combat cards, which I am always in desperate need of in Lords of Hellas, because I'm always getting destroyed in every combat that I enter. I also think that giving people control over the specific monsters is a great idea because it lessens the upkeep that was in the previous version. In Lords of Hellas, you always had to roll a dice and see what the monsters did. Now you can say, no, I control this monster. He's moving. Well, he's moving and smushing you, which I think is great. Giving players more control and more decisions to make, I think is always a good thing. And I also like, in theory, the new armies. In Lords of Hellas, you had a bunch of tiny little figures, hoplites they called them, running around the board, and you'd see there'd be swaths of 6 or 7 marching into one area if you used a march action. But in this one, you have one single figure that represents like an army strength. And I think it is so slick, this little dial that they have at the bottom, which you can adjust your army strength back and forth, so you don't need to put those tons of little figures on the board. I think this is a brilliantly slick mechanic, even though it seems like it shouldn't be used for this game. Because when you watch through some playthroughs, in the Quackalope playthrough, for example, you can see them picking up the figure and having to click it and putting it back down, and constantly having to do that might be more annoying than just putting out an additional figure. Also, they mention, and I can believe it, that it's harder to see and survey the area on the board. If you look and someone has 2 big army figures over there, you don't know if they're 1 or if they're 5 without leaning over and taking a peek. And if you were going for a surprise attack, well, then you just blew your whole shot. And now they know to prepare to defend that area. Unless you're playing against me, where you can just tell me what you're going for, and I'll say, oh yeah, and I'll immediately forget, and could have stopped you and just won't. And so those 2 points kind of dampen my enthusiasm for this dial system, but I just think we're gonna see these little dials and health counters underneath the base of minis in so many more things moving forward, because it does seem like such a slick system of counting health points and keeping it on the board. It makes me excited, even though I know it's probably more annoying. I don't care because I like it for some reason. I also think the storage looks fantastic. They have a significantly better way of storing your monuments, which come in chunks that you build up slowly over time. So yeah, have a separate spot in the storage container for each of those chunks so they're not just all scattered randomly to the side. I'm hyped. And maybe the best thing about their campaign page, if you're lacking pals to play with, they have their patented How to Pally video up for everyone to see, which I assume, I haven't watched it, but I assume it instructs you on how you can get your pals over, or get more pals who are interested in playing Lords of Ragnarok with you. Which is very helpful for me, because all of my pals have refused to play with me since, well, ever since that infamous uncooked chili night, which we said we would never speak of again. I just broke the vow. Anyway, as you can see, I am excited, and this very well might get my money. I can feel the purr inside my heart, the temptation of backing just one more thing. The rush of dopamine that I know will occur if I were to just... No! Stop it, Chris! Not yet! First, we have 5 reasons you shouldn't back. 5 chances to talk myself out of backing. So here we go. Enough with what we're excited about. Let's get into the nitty gritty. And welcome to everybody who just skipped ahead and is here now. I mean, I'd skip ahead too. I can't stand to be around myself for as long as I am forced to be. Reason number 5 you shouldn't back Lords of Ragnarok is if you're only excited because it's Awakened Realms. And this is a good reason to be excited. My friend, the aforementioned Zach, when he introduced me to Nemesis, I was blown away. I thought, this company is amazing. This value is incredible. I must get everything they produce from here on out to eternity. and so I kind of have. Well, I got Etherfields immediately, and I told myself, no, I'll only get the base pledge, and then immediately got everything when someone offered me a group pledge discounted on shipping. Coincidentally, which is why I talk about group pledges so much, they are fantastic. save yourself the money. If you are getting this game, go and find yourself a group pledge so you can save on that shipping. And then before Aetherfields even arrived, I tracked down someone who was selling the second wave of Tainted Grail, a full pledge. And I thought, yes, give me that too. This person happened to be my neighbor who was more than happy to sell it to me, and then he'll inevitably just borrow it from me later. So I guess I really got suckered in on that one. But the fact remains that I am still super high on Awakened Realms as a company. I think they produce quality games. I'm also really excited to be able to get a game from them that isn't a campaign style, because they've had a pretty huge run of that, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't get ISS Fan Card. I didn't even think about it, because I already had too much of that similar style from them already. But just because you love a company doesn't mean you're gonna love the game. So really take this time to reflect. Are you excited about Lords of Ragnarok, or are you excited because it's another Awakened Realms game and they make great games with decent value? I mean, it can be both. It probably should be both. But I just think there should be some interest, some percentage in the actual game itself. Because I'm trying to figure out what that percentage is in my own head. I think for me right now, I am 80% excited that it is Awakened Realms, and I'm just 20% excited that it's Lords of Ragnarok. They could be selling me anything, and I think I would have that 80% excitement. So I'm not sure if that percentage is enough. Everything inside me is screaming, just get that Awakened Realms game. But at least I have a full video to convince myself otherwise. It's half done already, and all I've done is hype myself up. Not like this. Now, reason number 4 you shouldn't back Lords of Ragnarok is if you haven't played Lords of Hellas to death. Now, the phrasing is specific here. Probably specific to you if you own Lords of Hellas as well. Because if you don't own either of them, well, I mean, this one has better rules, better minis, and is the updated version. They've been calling it the spiritual successor to Lords of Hellas, but it's so similar. It really feels like Lords of Hellas 2.0 to me. I mean, even if you look on Board Game Geek, under Lords of Hellas, there's now a little button that says re-implemented by Lords of Ragnarok. That's not a spiritual successor. That's just a better version. And with me owning Lords of Hellas, but not having played it that much, I don't know if I can justify getting this one with the changes being, well, they're not minor, they're not insignificant changes, but it's also not an entirely new game. I mean, at the same time, all the reasons that make Lords of Hellas fun, hey, sure, that's what's gonna make Lords of Ragnarok fun. Those variable win conditions, those blessings that you accrue over the course of the game, leveling up your hero in different paths. And sure, that's a testament to how fun it will be, but if you're like me, and I got Lords of Hellas recently used for 50 bucks, I know it was a pretty good deal, and I haven't played it that much yet. I mean, to be fair, I've played it more than quite a few games in my collection, but I still feel like I have a lot to learn and to explore with the game, especially since I am completely horrendous at this game. I've never been so bad at a game before as I am with Lords of Hellas. But I'm learning. See, I just don't know if there's enough variance to warrant getting the two. And that's a question you'll have to ask yourself as well, if you think the differences are that significant. Because to me, I can see how they're different, but I can also see that my feeling while playing the game will remain fairly consistent with my feeling when playing Lords of Hellas. Especially if you aren't at that point where you've played Lords of Hellas to death, you're tired of it, you want that new version. If you still have room to explore and things to do, well, as far as spiritual successor, I have to compare it to the only other trilogy that I know of that's used that language, which is Eric Lang's trilogy of Blood Rage, Rising Sun, and Ankh, and those games are very different. There is absolutely a spot for them all in my collection, and I enjoy all of them. Lords of Hellas, Lords of Ragnarok, I don't see that they're different enough. So either I continue to play Lords of Hellas until 2 years from now when Lords of Ragnarok arrives, and then I sell Lords of Hellas and play the new version, viable, or I just say, yeah, I'm happy with Lords of Hellas as it is. It will give me basically the same experience, and I can always get it later on down the road. So this is something that I am also struggling with. I haven't played Lords of Hellas to death. I don't feel like I need the new and shiny version. I just want it because it's new and shiny. But I think they look like they play fairly similarly. And the main difference, I think, judging by the rules that they have up and the gameplay videos that are on the page as well, which is a good thing that they exist because they are certainly not putting out a rule book if I know Awakened Realms before the end of this campaign. Unfortunate, but they just don't get around to it. Anyway, the main difference between the two, and is also our reason number 3 you shouldn't back, is if you don't like tight boards. Now, the board itself is significantly different from Lords of Hellas, and I think the feeling of the area control game is going to be a lot more in your face with this one. Yes, there are other differences. We've talked about them. There are other differences, but the action selection, while I like the change, it's still basically the same actions that you had to draw from in the previous game. They still feel mechanically to what came before, but with this new map, everything is so much tighter. You can see this in the gameplay videos. You can see with the ships in this different sea spaces that you can teleport to the other side of the board, whereas Lords of Hellas' board is more like Risk in terms of things being spread out. Lords of Ragnarok is more like Kemet, if you've played it, where everything is 1 or 2 spots away. Even though it doesn't seem like it is, it for sure is. And to me, that's one of the main draws. Or it might be one of the main detractors. Honestly, I don't know. And maybe this is a change that makes you say, nah, it's different enough for me to add it to my collection, in which case, great. Then maybe this isn't a reason not to back. But it feels like Ragnarok is pushing that combat element a little bit more. There are going to be more opportunities to move around. There are going to be more opportunities to be sneaky and have surprise attacks. Or you can just ultimately accept that every space that you own is always vulnerable to attack. And you might like this. Again, this might get you excited. Or you might prefer a game that lets you turtle. You might find it annoying to always have your plans disrupted. And if that's the case, well then, Lords of Ragnarok, I do not believe, is the game for you. Anyway, that's number 3. The toitness of the board. Now moving along to reason number 2, you shouldn't back Lords of Ragnarok, and that's that the stretch goals don't add enough value. And this is a tough one. It's a future point. This video is coming out early in the campaign because they've hit $1 million early in the campaign. I mean, hey, if I timed it right, maybe I was able to film it and release it exactly as the clock struck $1 million. And I almost hate adding this point right now because I would like to give you the definitive answer here and now. You can walk away. You don't have to keep on checking the campaign page. I'm able to give you what my exes were never able to give me. Closure. But you need to make sure that you feel like you're getting significant value out of those extra stretch goals. So significant that it won't make sense for you to get it later on. I mean, obviously, this seems kind of like crowdfunding 101, but it's worth considering, even though they have a big sign saying over 100 euros worth of stretch goals. That's the value you're getting. And I believe there's going to be a lot of stretch goals. If the other Awakened Realms campaigns are anything to go by, you're going to get a box probably as big as Lords of Ragnarok itself. But just because they throw up a dollar sign doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to give you that much. What good is a 5-player expansion if you never play with 5? Or the game isn't that good with more than 4? I'm not saying this is going to be the case with Lords of Ragnarok. I don't even know if there's going to be a 5th-player expansion. Just judging by the size of the board, maybe not. But this is the case for some campaigns. And I also don't see there being a bunch of little things just judging by their release schedule. They said they're going to provide updates every 2 days, which is the same thing that they did for Nemesis on Mars. Nemarsis Lockdown, I think it was called. And so we can therefore project 12 or so days of stretch goal content. I mean, with that, my guess would be some extra heroes, some extra monsters, some extra monuments, maybe that 5th-player expansion, and maybe one extra little variance to the game modes. That's probably it. Who knows, maybe they'll even change the control markers so that they aren't exactly the same ones as from Lords of Hellas. It's a different game, I swear. Now, on the one hand, this is a nice approach, right? It's nice to have this scheduled content, that way you can keep up the excitement throughout the whole campaign. They're gonna have time to plan around backer feedback and react to that, which I think is always fun to see, and Awakened Realms does a really great job, I think, during the campaign of making the backers feel like they had a hand in creating some of this. It makes a really nice journey for backing. The Ether Fields campaign was so much fun. But on the other hand, it sometimes makes you feel like you're getting more than you actually did. Remember, with stretch goals, these are mostly planned out in advance, and so you are therefore paying for them. They're included in the cost of your pledge. So are you getting an equal increase in that stretch goal value? Especially to make up for the split wave shipping that so many people are going to get. Remember, you're paying in advance. It isn't free. You're just being forced to pay for it now for the cost of your shipping. So what is that cost worth to you? And is it enough to get it now, or are the stretch goals insignificant? And I know a lot of them won't feel insignificant. The extra heroes, variability. Extra monsters, wow! And I get that. And that's what's gonna suck me in too. I can feel it. But I also know, having just played Lords of Hellas with the different hero powers, or having played the others recently and realizing, oh, if I want to try the other heroes, I can just print off their abilities on a piece of paper. Do those stretch goals actually enhance your value or just give you the appearance of value enhancement? And finally, the number one reason you shouldn't back Lords of Ragnarok. I've gotten through this video maybe without calling it Lords of Hellas, but I don't know. Every time I say Lords of, I want to finish it with... It happened again. Oh no, I was supposed to do it that time. I want to finish it with Lords of Hellas. Doesn't matter. The number one reason you shouldn't back Lords of is you already have too many area control games that you love. And hey, this could include Lords of Hellas, but I recently played Lords of Hellas and Ankh in the same gaming session. And while both were great, and we had a great time with both of them, we were all like, oh yeah, but Ankh was better though, right? And I like a lot of games in this genre. I mentioned this at the beginning. And all these games are unique in the sense that they're the same, in the sense that they usually play better with two. They usually sit around that 2-hour plus mark. Honestly, one of the reasons I found I enjoyed Lords of Hellas is because it was so much shorter, because I played so poorly. Anyway, I think it's a common theme that if you like the dudettes on a map, those style of games, you might already have a lot of them. And I swear this was my number one reason before Shira, hi Shira, said a similar thing at the end of the review on Board Game Co.'s channel. But the question you really have to ask yourself is, against which games will this fight for a spot at the table? Will you just decide to play Blood Rage 9 times out of 10? Or the new edition of Kemet, never called it Kemet before in my life, or Rising Sun, or Ankh, or Scythe, or Cyclades, or Innis, or Cry Havoc, or any other 10 games in this genre that will be released from now to whenever Lords of Ragnarok arrives at your door. It is not conscience, but time that doth make cowards of us all. And with only having a limited amount of time to play games, or only being able to get your specific group together X amount of times, what games are going to have to make way in order to give Lords of Ragnarok the time that it deserves? Because it does deserve to get a lot of playtime, table time, tummy time. If you back it, it deserves to be played, but something will inevitably have to make way, as is always the case. I mean, hey, maybe you love the genre, and maybe all the games you own of that genre get consistent playtime. That's fantastic. Bring me to your group. But for me, I enjoy playing these types of games with a specific group. And I have to ask myself, is this reasonably going to make it to the table enough to make it a worthwhile purchase? It's certainly not going to eat into my Rising Sun time. I'll tell you that for free. So what other games have to make way in order for this type of game to get to the table? I mean, I want to say, oh yeah, of course it will. Obvio, of course it'll get to the table. And yet, I don't know. I hope so. I'm sure we all hope so. But realistically, I don't know. I know. I've got all these questions, and only you have the answers. So please, please tell me the answers. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. Either way, that's it. Those are my 5 reasons you shouldn't back. What about you? Where are you at? Do you have additional reasons? Do you agree with mine? Disagree with mine? That's cool too. We have a lovely discourse on this channel. Should I just do it? Because it's been almost 2 months since I backed something, and I'm feeling the itch. And I deserve it. I deserve it. Oh, I deserve it. Stop that. I mean, right now, I'm very much on the fence. The gameplay gets me really excited to try it out, but obviously the shipping turns me off. So for me, I'll most likely be waiting until the group pledges come out. What are they going to cost? What are they going to cost in shipping? And also at that time, we'll be able to see a lot more of the stretch goals that have been put out, and I'll be able to better evaluate if it can squeeze its way in there or if I will take a pass. I don't know. It's gonna be close. See, I walked into the campaign thinking, yep, just gonna get it. And maybe it's because it was 115 versus 100. Same thing with Masters of the Universe that made me pause, slow my roll, that extra couple of coins. But after doing my own due diligence and looking into it and thinking about it, I just don't know if I can justify it. Plus, I know I should opt for one-way shipping when I'm gonna want to do two-way shipping so that it doesn't arrive 2 years from now after inevitable delays. 2 years? What a scheme. We'll all be living underground at that point, paying homage to the Lizard King for letting us in. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for sticking around. And hey, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button on your way out because it really helps me fill the unending void of darkness and despair that this shell of a meat suit is consistently attempting to hide. Hello, darkness, my old friend. Once again, my name is Chris George. I don't have a catchphrase. And you know, I really thought I'd think of one by the time I got to the end of this video. But I guess I'll just say, always remember to double check the internal temperature of the meat in your chili. And Peter, you still owe me for that renovation.